Good morning. Would you prefer I called you GP or Greg?
Whichever you like.
GP sounds great. It is such an honor and a
Some people just call it
privilege.
G. Oh, pleasure to meet you. Thank you for inviting me to do this. This is wonderful.
This is
Amazing.
wonderful. You know, just in the short period of time that I've gotten to know you, I feel like I've gotten to know you quite deeply. And I appreciate the opportunity for that. And you describe yourself as a composer and a master coach and a spiritual teacher. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how that's all come together for you?
Oh my goodness. Well, you're going to have to cut me off because it can go on for a while. Well, it's kind of been an inclination all my life. I started playing music when I was about 5, and it's kind of, except for dabbling in acting, it was pretty much what I liked to do and what I wanted to do. So I studied it quite profusely. I majored it in college. I actually did do a little acting. I used to do voiceovers for commercials and radio, and I even did some video games, which was kind of funny. When I lived out near you, I used to live in Fremont, actually.
Ah,
That's where I raised my kids, so I have California kids. But I also, at the same time, it always had this enormous spiritual curiosity, and it always had rather unusual experiences happening, just kind of knowing things that I had no idea how I was knowing it, just kind of intuitively knowing what people were thinking, knowing what they were feeling, even knowing what they needed. And just through a long series of experiences, which I feel were just kind of, whatever's in charge of this whole thing, whatever you want to call it, moments of education. I felt like I had a very unusual education because I would have experiences and then insights into what had actually happened, which were really quite penetrating, which really made me question everything about the nature of reality and about myself and what my identity was and how it was constructed. And I grew up in the Chicago area, outside of Chicago, a small town actually, back in the 50s and 60s. So there wasn't a whole lot available information in terms like there is now. You couldn't Google the internet and find out if it had been Vedanta or Zen Buddhism, or nobody had ever heard of the law of attraction. I mean, it was the middle 70s before A Course in Miracles was written, right? So there was kind of a dearth of information, so I had to kind of make it up as I went along because I was just so curious about it. I couldn't help myself. I just kind of absorbed everything that I could find. And so I went through a period of time of really being interested in metaphysical healing, interested in the symbology of the Bible. I actually studied it for many years, quite extensively. I had Hebrew and Greek dictionaries. I had about every kind of translation that you could find. I had access to the Interpreter's Bible, which is like this 45-volume set. And just got completely absorbed in trying to find the meaning of it. I never bought the traditional meaning of what it meant. My experiences were just so far outside that I couldn't accept it. And over time, things just became clearer and clearer and clearer, and questions just became answered, not through the mind, but experientially. Oftentimes the experience would contradict what I thought was going on, and I'd have to invent a new context for it, because life is just completely, life defines itself, right? Mm-hmm. And we get stuck in our little patterns of what we think it is, and then we want it to conform to our patterns, and of course that's where all our troubles come from. But I got pretty good at recognizing that when I was in a box, and I was just being hemmed in by my own view of things, which was never going to be adequate. It's an infinite universe for crying out loud. And so little by little, it just became clearer and clearer. And as that happened, a very natural opening of the heart took place. where I became less and less concerned about myself and more concerned about others. As you see deeper into the human condition, you just can't help but begin to experience a deep sense of compassion. Every stupid mistake I've made is the same stupid mistake all humans make. And so the experience of an individual really can be generalized to the experience of all of us, because we all have, the circumstances are different. The essence of the experience is pretty much the same. I mean, we all experience love and suffering. That's what life is. And so I became more and more increasingly drawn to teaching and coaching. They didn't call it coaching at the time. That term didn't appear until like the 80s or so, other than gym teachers. It was a good term when it came when it was invented. There wasn't a term for it when I started doing this, and people would come to me with their with questions because I had some answers, and that period of time in the 70s up to the 80s, when the whole human potential movement really began to explode, there was a lot of unrest. Well, the 60s as well, a lot of unrest. The 60s was more of an external unrest, which went increasingly inside as people questioned more and more their values and the nature of institutions and what it is we have built here. And I just found that I had a knack for being able to discern how to articulate it based on whoever I happened to be talking to. Because you can't just, you can't teach this stuff like it's a formula or like it's a nice little thing in a book you can read and hear the steps you go through, because everybody's experience is so deep and so different that you really have to be able to articulate something in terms that somebody can understand.
So let me stop you there for a second. Is what you're saying part of your journey was the discovery or rediscovery of your own true essence at a deeper level, and then what you were able to teach people and extract from your own learning was the ability to help someone else tap into their own true essence? Is that it's so elusive, it's hard to kind of put a framework around it, because you
hit the nail right on the head. It was so clear to me that my experience was common to pretty much everybody, and that my job then was to be able to articulate it. And I was fortunate enough to be drawn to learn how to speak, to learn how to articulate, to learn to use my voice, to learn to listen, to pick up on the cues of where people were at and be able to respond to it accordingly, which is a gift, but it's also a skill. One can learn how to do that. And so that's absolutely correct. Everything I would come to see about myself would immediately want to come out and be shared with others, and I think that's kind of inevitable on the path. Until finally I found I wasn't doing music at all. All I was doing is teaching, and now actually, yesterday was the first time I actually wrote some music in a long time for a meditation project that I'm doing. So pretty much all the music I do now, it has to do with the teaching and the meditation.